Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Welcome back to another session with my dear brother Abdurraheem Green and myself, Abdul Haqq. You are back and you are witnessing, experiencing, participating in none other than a piece of cake.
A piece of cake. A piece.
How you doing,
I was too
Abdurraheem?
fascinated by seeing your son in the mirror. But anyway, he's gone now. But
yeah, he's just moved across. That's right. all 6 foot of him, mashallah.
mashallah.
No, Jazakallah khair, Abdurraheem. It's been. I know I was off a week. I've returned, and Jazakallah khair for your patience, and Jazakumullah khair to all of our participants, should I say, and their patience, mashallah. Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, Sister Nilofa, Ibtisam, and those of you who have joined us. And today, an anticipated subject, Brother Abdurraheem, one that we have been looking at and pondering over for a few weeks, and mind over matter, prioritizing mental health. Now, I think we should start at looking at what is mental health to you, to me. What does that mean?
I was thinking about this, and I one of the things that I think, Abdul Haqq, bro, is that we live. I think a lot of the issues to do with mental health are often to do with the paradigm in which we live. In other words, the social construct, the ideas, of what it means to live the good life, right? What it means to be a human being, what it means to be normal, what people think life is for and what life is about. And I think that part of the whole discussion about mental health, like so many things, bro, this is what I'm finding. And I've literally known this since I became Muslim, but it just becomes more and more clear. It's the blacksmith, bro, the whole hadith of the blacksmith, right? That, whoever lives with a blacksmith, even if he doesn't drop a coal on you and burn you, you're going to come out smelling of smoke. And I think if we think of the world today that is based on an ideology or ideas that are not from Allah, that are not the ones that the Creator has given us, they're not the paradigms that we're supposed to be living by, according to the supreme, the beautiful guidance of God, then obviously we're going to come into problems, right? And I think, I could obviously go on and on about that, but that's basically my starting point. For me, the starting point of this whole discussion is, how do we even frame what the good life is? What is mental health? Like, what is the context in what we're talking about mental health, right? So just to, obviously you've probably thought or already in advance thought of this example, but when I think of mental health in a state of someone who clearly wasn't happy, right, by any of the paradigms that we would think of in the West, you look at Yaqub, right, who's known as Israel, right, or Yaqub, the father of Yusuf and the father of Benjamin and the father of the 12 sons. And like, he was so distressed by his Yusuf's disappearance that he went blind, right? And that's what I think is, that's really, like, this would be defined today as a mental health problem. But astaghfirullah, to say that a messenger of Allah had a mental health, he did not have a mental health problem, right? And the reason is because we don't frame the whole conversation, we don't frame the whole approach to what life is about in the same way. Yeah. And I think everyone listening has to understand that, right? From the get-go, right? When you think you have mental health problems, my first question is to you: do you really have mental health problems? Or is it you just not fitting into what the society around you is expecting of you, or the sort of the definition that they've given, right? And if you got your definitions wrong, if you got your ideas wrong, you're going to get it wrong. It's going to be all downhill from there, bro. That's my
I
start
think
off.
that's very apt. What you said
Yeah.
is spot on, so far as the paradigmatic context that we frame our conditions in. And what the example you've given, mashallah, of Yaqub alayhi salam, I think is an amazing one. And we know, and you can also bring Prophet Ayub alayhi salam, you can also bring Prophet Muhammad
Yeah.
sallallahu alaihi wasallam, you can bring Musa alayhi salam,
Sallallahu.
and no one will say that they had mental health issues. But this is not to, I understand what you're saying. You're not marginalizing and disparaging the real mental health that exists. There are those who do have mental health issues, and they are clear.
Yeah.
But again, society today allows individuals to lean on so many crutches that when they're unable to deal with something that, as you've mentioned, if we go back to our grandparents' times, were not considered mental health issues. Okay, they addressed things, they got on, there were challenges of life. But nowadays, anything that's a challenge or remotely a challenge that one is unable to deal with, they can reach out for mental health. And there will be, for sure, there will be a plethora of services and facilities to say, yes, you've got mental health issues. So much so that we're seeing gender dysmorphia, we're seeing all sorts of things coming up because individuals are saying we've got mental health. Again, it's not dismissing the genuine examples, and we will touch upon that. And I believe that since obviously embracing Islam, and you and I know the difference being non-Muslim and becoming Muslim, and I feel, speaking to what you said, that what we are doing today, mankind does today, is only concentrate on two aspects: intellectual and physical. So as long as we're satiating or satiating, however you pronounce it, the mental, the intellectual, okay, where that mental engagement in things, it may be literature, it may be music, it may be whatever for non-Muslims and Muslims. And as long as the physical, the carnal, the what we enjoy of eating and consumables are being fulfilled, then we feel that that's it. But clearly it's not. We only have to look at the famous musicians and stars and everything who have got everything in those two realms, if you like, and they're miserable. And some have even committed suicide. And the reason being, Abdurraheem, is because, as you and I, when we were giving dawah in the 90s, we'd mentioned, they're not paying attention to the spiritual nourishment. And like you can eat physically impure and damaging unhealthy food, the same way you can even neglect spiritual nourishment or take in the wrong spiritual nourishment, which still results in the same thing: a destruction of the soul, a damaging of the soul. And I agree with you. So I feel that this aspect, this spiritual aspect, is something where, let's look, you hear of societies being godless, of being spiritualist. That is a reality that's there. And that's from there emanates mental health crises, not the ones we're going to talk about from the perspective of medical, but the ones that we are seeing in society today, where there's a lack of contentment, there's an absence of satisfaction and solace, and it's because of these particular aspects here. And we know from the Quran, verily in the recitation of the Quran do the hearts find rest. In the dhikr of Allah do the souls find that tranquility. The question is, how many of us are actually achieving that? And I'm not going into the realms of Sufism here. We're talking about the deen, the complete aspect of the deen in practice and in spirituality combined to deal with those aspects of mental stress.
I think the thing is, bro, as well, it's very useful for us to understand. I think that when we talk about the soul, when we talk about the heart, when we talk about the mind, they are in fact one and the same thing, right? Although, you may locate them separately biologically, but from the point of view of, I think the Islamic perspective, this whole aspect of the qalb. And I think there's a statement of Imam Ahmed as well, that the mind and the heart, they're the same thing. And so this whole topic of purification of the soul, this is a topic in Islam. They don't just call it, it's just not called mental health, right? In the Islamic tradition, it's called suluk, yeah. Or to be fair, I guess from the civilizational perspective, that's what they've called tasawwuf, right? And I'm just distinguishing here from the application of the word tasawwuf to the whole realm of tazkiyat al-nafs and the purification of the heart, and which, like, a lot of people just call it that, right? And as opposed to Sufism in its extreme form, where it becomes a sort of weird sort of cult, yeah. And I think that it's important to distinguish those two things. But I think the point being here is that we have this in Islam. And I think that the most important thing really for everybody to remember, and you've mentioned it, and probably we should mention it as many times as we can in this discussion tonight, yeah, that the ayah where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us that verily in the remembrance of Allah, the hearts find rest. Yeah, most certainly and most definitely, if you are looking for peace and you're looking for tranquility, and let's forget happiness, because I think the thing here is that really what we find in the modern world is this idea of the pursuit of happiness. Everybody is looking for happiness. There are untold numbers of books and studies on happiness. And this whole thing of happiness, happiness itself has become so wide, right? And it's become so broad, and I think so misunderstood as to what happiness really is. But I think, if we look in the world, people think I should be happy, and if I'm not happy, there's something wrong with me. And I pretty much think that that's what mental health, like in the broad sense. I'm not talking about, but I don't even, to be honest, bro, I don't even like the whole discussion around mental health. I think the whole way it's talked about, the whole way it's dealt with is fundamentally wrong. Yeah, that's what I believe, bro. I think it's, it comes from a wrong paradigm. That's the thing. So I give you an example, right? Like this is a different example, but like one of the reasons why I rejected Buddhism, although I found that Buddhism, as I practiced it, was really good from the point of view, it was physically good, it was mentally good. I seemed to be, progressing spiritually. But the problem is I realized that the paradigm, the whole foundation on which Buddhism was built, seemed to be totally wrong. The premise was wrong. And if the premise was wrong, everything else after that, well, some things might be right just almost by coincidence or whatever, right? But inevitably, it's going to go in the wrong direction. If the fundamental premise is wrong, and it's the same when we talk about mental health, right? The problem is not mental health, right? The problem is people are not connected to Allah. And the problem here is the whole conversation, the whole way we frame the conversation, the whole way we analyze the problem. Which one of these psychologists or psychiatrists or neurobiologists or whatever scientists sits down and is contemplating the issue of a person's lack of connection with Allah, the lack of understanding of their purpose in life? No one does that. And if they're not doing that, every single thing that they're going to result in is going to go in the wrong direction. That's inevitable, bro. Right?
Right.
And so even things when we talk about autism, right? Like you think things that, we could say that's a genuine mental health problem, autism. Let's say, is that something we'd probably agree but is it really a mental health problem? Right? Is it really, or is it just that just people are different? And what's wrong with people being different? People have different skill sets. For example, shyness is good in Islam. The Prophet sallallahu, there were people who were really shy, and someone was being criticized for being too shy, and they said, don't criticize him. The Prophet said, in shyness is all good. You know, autistic people can be very, very shy, right? But in a society where you are encouraged to be, you know, a bit like you and me, you know, quite alpha male, outgoing, confident, loudmouth. We can chat a bit of chat. You know what I mean? Yeah. Like these are the guys you want to be like. Oh, my son, look at Abdul. You know, look at Dr. Baker and Mr. Green. Yeah, you want to be like them. And he just wants to melt away. But what's with being shy? There's nothing. It's a good thing in Islam. Shyness is a good thing. Keeping away from people and avoiding people. There's so many things that encourages, you know, stay to your home and avoid the streets and don't sit on the streets. And, you know, things that we think, oh, this is the, you know, like that would be considered like you have a mental health problem, but it's considered to be a virtue in Islam, right? You could be really shy around girls. Oh my God, what's your problem, right? That's a virtue in Islam to be like that. So here's the thing: is there may be things that are actually mental health problems, and they are virtuous in the sight of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That's what I'm saying. The whole paradigm is wrong. The whole framework is wrong. And I think it's very, very problematic and very, very dangerous, bro. I think this is the thing, right? And even when we talk about this mix and match, and I mean, look, I'm super interested in psychology. I think it's really fascinating, but I'm fascinated it from the perspective of the insights it can give into, you know, how the human mind works and how it doesn't work, right? But I'm really not convinced that I would love to have some specific examples, right? Okay, I have a mental health problem. Okay, what is it? What's this? Tell me what this mental health problem is exactly. Define it for me, right? And then we can start to have a conversation, right? Because that's where I have to start from, really. So, I mean, I'd be interested to hear from you, bro. What would you consider to be, you know, genuine mental health problems as opposed to sort of, you know, diversionary, you know,
no, alhamdulillah. And I think very good point. I think Lucy mentioned, I think with autism, it's a neurological condition. Okay. So yeah, and Lucy Wynne Jones, thanks. They cannot read emotions for the same extent. Now I've got this brother, mashallah tabarakallah, that I've been working with remotely, a Muslim disability awareness, and I've got his wife, mashallah, founded this particular organization, should I say, but he has a genuine condition. Okay, and when we see, he basically he's diagnosed with intellectual disability, language developmental disorder, childhood autism. So this condition has inhibited his development. His wife founded it. Unfortunately, she passed away. She founded this organization with regards to Muslim disability awareness. So there are legitimate.
Okay, can I deconstruct all of that then? Let me ask you to deconstruct that. Yeah, when you say disability, when you say he's not able to function properly, by whose criterion? By whose standard of what does functioning properly mean?
Medically, right? I think we're talking medically here. So, for example, I will give. When I come back to a point. So, for example, his condition that he was born with, 𝗠𝗶H atresia and tracheoesophageal fistula. Okay,
just tell us what it is, bro. We don't need Latin.
So we're not medical doctors. Now I hear you, but when I want to speak from a personal perspective, when my son was born with tetralogy of Fallot's, okay, and attached to that was DiGeorge syndrome, okay, and we had to research and see what the effects of that would be, and he had it in the most mildest form, and thankfully, alhamdulillah, but we saw the severest form, and there were different degrees of psychological issues that could affect them, that could become more pronounced as they grow older. Okay, now that's recognized. I've seen that. I've witnessed that with my son in the mildest form, alhamdulillah. He's leading a normal life to the best of his abilities and everything, alhamdulillah, and he's doing quite well. So there are medical, clinically diagnosed mental health markers, conditions that are actually there. And I think those ones there, I think when we speak about those, I want to speak about those in a little bit more detail about how we, as a whole, address those with genuine issues. The ones that you're speaking, the category that you're speaking about, I'm with you on that. Today, it's a trigger. You'll hear someone who cannot deal with a stressful situation, or let's say you and me are getting into a discussion. You're like, oh, my mental health, Abdul Haqq, I can't do it with my mental health. This is your way of shutting down everything else. You may have an emotional thing. You may have an emotional issue. You may have stress. But the facilitation of all things mental health, that spectrum has become so wide now that what you're speaking about, I understand that. When we unpack mental health, we've got to divorce it from those genuine,
Bro,
diagnosed,
listen,
established cases.
The thing is, bro, for me, right? For me is the whole structure of the conversation. So it's very interesting listening to you as a person who has experienced this directly, yeah, within your own family, yeah. Yeah, I mean, the thing is that for me, it's the framework around the discussion, right? Because I have fundamental problems with that framework. That's that's what I'm saying. I have problem with the framework, yeah. Because basically, let me break it down for you. What you have is a bunch of people who are basically justifying their own existence, and I'm talking about here the medical establishment, right? And they are literally inventing year by year, day by day. They have a book, you know, there is a book that lists all these mental healths, and it's getting bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger. And obviously the temptation for these people is to simply diagnose almost everything that they consider an aberration to be a mental health problem, right? So, I mean, who are we to say it's genuine? If these experts in the field and these scientists have decided to put it in their big book and say it's a mental health issue, then it's a mental health issue. But for me, the whole process from the beginning of the very thing of the diagnosis itself, the very approach that we take in saying that this person has a genuine mental health problem, I think we have to go back and we have to look at it from an Islamic perspective, right? And I think from the Islamic perspective, and you know, that seems to me is that it's simply the question: is someone responsible for their actions or not? That's the thing, right? I think the term is mukhallaf in Arabic, right? Is the person responsible for their actions? Are they accountable for what they do or not, right? So are they accountable for praying? Are they accountable for fasting? Are they accountable for any number of given things? So this is where it starts, right? This is where we have to start. Is the person accountable or not?
Can
Now,
I
if the
interject there,
person
Abdul?
is genuinely not in the position where they are not accountable, and we can say, no, even this person's 30 years old, but we know their state of mind is such that they cannot be considered responsible and accountable. That is it. That is the only issue that we consider to be genuine mental health problem from an Islamic perspective. I don't mean from the perspective, of functioning in society. I mean that, and I think that's how we should start. You understand, bro?
Sorry for interjecting, but isn't that we're talking here about sanity and insanity? That's where we're talking about the ability to look after yourself, and
maybe not necessarily, because someone, I would say my 9-year-old boy, right? He's not insane, right? He's not insane. He's a 9-year-old boy. He's extremely smart and he's extremely capable, and he probably do a whole ton of things that a lot of adults I know can't do. Yeah. But he's not responsible. He's not accountable, right? He's not considered to be at that age where he is responsible and accountable, right? Because he has not reached that stage of mental awareness, right? Where he, so some people get stuck at a certain stage of mental development, right? They don't grow those abilities that a person is considered to have to need to be really accountable within the context of the religion and society, right? So that would seem to me to be a very clear demarcation, right, point. And it doesn't mean the person's insane, right? It doesn't mean that, you know, what they call majnoon in Arabic, right? Okay, but it doesn't mean they're actually insane. It just may mean that they have not reached that
threshold,
you know, that position mentally where they could be really considered to be fully accountable for what they're doing and for what they're saying, right? And so, yeah, I mean, so we know that, I mean, this definitely, bro, this can happen, right? Even to adults, even to people, you know, people who fall in love. Now you talk about love, right? And there's so many poems and so many things that talk about love. And there is a type of love, ishq, yeah, which is a type, literally a type of insanity. And we've talked about this before, right? When you literally combine those, you know, those neurochemicals, those neurotransmitters, right? You put a bit of dopamine and you put a bit of adrenaline and you put some endorphins and serotonin and you boost it all up, and you might as well be possessed, right? Because, you know, you're not in your right mind. And, you know, anyone who's experienced that type of intense love, right, it literally is, you know, a type of madness. But the thing is here is, it doesn't relieve us of that responsibility, that we're still responsible. It doesn't mean we're excused for doing crazy things like killing somebody. You're still accountable for that, right? So I think this is the point, that, you know, from the point of view of, you can have mental health problems, but to what extent is that an excuse? And it would seem to me that there are mental health problems that you have power over, and that you can avoid, or you could have avoided, right? And it's interesting that we're talking about Sufis, right? It's interesting that Ibn Taymiyyah, and I think he talks about, you know, some of the Sufis who reached this ecstatic state, and then they said some like words of kufr, right? And some people excused it by saying, well, they were in a state of madness because they were literally intoxicated. And it's interesting that Ibn Taymiyyah accepted that possibility, but he said, but they didn't need to get themselves into that state of intoxication, right? You can avoid that. You know that if you get into that state, you're going to do those crazy things. And that's the point that we're talking about here, right? Mental health can't be a cop-out for you not following the path of guidance. Yes, you may have mental health problems, right? But did you cause those yourself? You may watch a lot of porn and that may give you a mental health problem, and you start calling women bitches and this and that and having you did that to yourself, right? You made yourself sick by your behavior, right? And it's not an excuse. And that's the difference, bro. I agree with you. There's things that is a byproduct of a genuine mental, what you call it, physiological condition, that you don't have any control over that, right? And mental states that are a byproduct of your wrong life choices.
Right. And no, that's right on point, Abdurraheem. So when we look at those who perpetuate their own problem, we see that, for example, now in social media. We see that with what's happened around the pandemic and this fixation on particular narratives, whatever those narratives may be. We see, for example, as you said, shyness is good. We've seen that an embarrassment amongst young people now to be called a virgin. That's something that's not virtuous. And it moves on. You see these movies over the decades have come about that there must be something wrong with me because I've still got my virginity at 18, at 15, at 17, at 19, or whatever. We discussed recently about the incels and some of them feeling sorry for themselves to the extent that they feel they've got a mental health issue. It's self-perpetuating. Everything you said there, I agree entirely with. Now, one of the areas I think as well, though, is how we, and moving slightly tangentially, how we deal with those with established mental health conditions. And there's a sort of shunning or impatience, and I'm talking genuine cases now, not what you and I were speaking, the crutch that everyone else is holding on to because society has said you can hold on to these. But the genuine cases where you and I can see, we've met individuals that have problems. You can see it when you engage with them. Those who come in as Muslims, and they need that time. They need that attention. they need that patience. They're not asking of it from you, but you can see they're not fitting in as a regular, whatever that is defined as, person is.
Yeah.
And they're shunned. And I've seen that. I've seen that, Abdurraheem.
Yeah.
I've seen that. I've seen
But
an
I mean,
impatience,
obviously,
an
you and me, bro.
intolerance.
Yeah.
And we need to look at that as Muslims. Okay. And one of the examples that comes to mind now, and I'm not saying it's a mental health issue, but let's look at something that was very transparent, apparent. The individual who came into the mosque of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, Masjid Nabawi, and urinated. And the response of the Sahaba were to go and attack, and the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam stopped and said, no, let him finish relieving himself. And let's look at the hikmah, the wisdom behind that, because if they'd all dived on him, he would have, I'm going to be frank, he would have sprayed everywhere. That's one thing. Okay. The mess would have been even wider. Okay. Two, they would have sold themselves from trying to prevent him, and he would have the impression that would have been left upon him at that particular point. He's come to a masjid for a reason, to be he didn't come to disrespect the mosque. This is the masjid. It's one thing that's clear. He didn't come to disrespect the masjid. He was a Bedouin. He was an Arab. This was he was not from the same tribe or understanding as those who were there.
He was a Bedouin,
but there was an understanding. There was an understanding. There was a patience. There was a tolerance. And I know that's not a prime example to use equating to mental health, but the point I'm saying is, someone came in,
but it's
and
a very,
was different.
Very good example.
Was
it's a
different.
Good example.
And
I think it's a really good example.
We need to learn how to be with those who, let's say, society considers them different. Let's say our community is its composite structure is of a particular type or particular mosaic of people, but we've got a minority of individuals who are a particular way, that we see maybe from a mental, psychological perspective. We've got to stop marginalizing them and shunning them and showing intolerance. And that's something that society, I think, has shaped many of us to do.
Yeah, bro, listen, I mean, it's very interesting, very, very interesting discussion. Yeah. And I think the thing is here is that a lot of our listeners now, right, will be very, very familiar with what I'm going to say. And it goes back to what I started this whole conversation with. How do you frame mental health? How do you frame it? What is the definition of good mental health? Because in order to be able to understand if someone is mentally ill, you have to be able to have some sort of definition and some sort of baseline of what you say a person is mentally healthy, right? You can't define what is ill without having an idea of mental health. But really, in reality, when we're talking about mental health from a Western perspective, almost always mental health means you're just not doing what everyone else in society does. And by the way, it's not just the West. Everyone does this. So hello, everyone from the Pakistani community. I know you're my favorite target, but it's only because I know that community better than any other Muslim community, because I'm married, my wife is from that community. And yeah, I've been brought up with it more than anything else as a Muslim. So I'm sure everyone will be familiar with the thing within the Pakistani community, and it's probably still is a thing, maybe it's not anymore, that any girl who comes along and has a different idea, suddenly she's possessed by a jinn and she needs to have the jinn exorcised from her, right, and have chili thrown in her face because she's possessed by a jinn. And like, for me, it's like, well, that's just how people behave in my culture. That's how we just do stuff like that, right? Yet within that culture, that person is considered to be mentally ill. And it just proves my point, what I was saying, that something in one culture, in our Western culture, right, there's a whole range of behaviors that are considered to be absolutely normal. And in Pakistani culture, displaying those behaviors is a sign of being possessed by a jinn, which means you're mad. Basically, you're majnoon, you're mentally sick. There's something really, really wrong with you. And there's a long list of things like that we can think of. And so in reality, a lot of this discussion about mental health is not even a discussion, because the whole framework, like the point being, right? And it goes back to your point, bro, about tolerance. It goes back to your point about tolerating people who are different, and tolerating people who behave differently, and tolerating people who don't fit into your paradigm and don't behave the way that you think is the right way to behave, right? But this is a problem of isolating people, isolating their cultures, thinking that your culture is superior, thinking your tribal customs are the right tribal customs, and this and that, and then linking all of this somehow to mental health, that if you don't behave like this. But this is what it's all about. And why, bro, did people call the prophets mad? Why did they call the prophets mad? The people accused the prophets of being mad. Why? Because they stood against everything society was standing for. And this is my problem. My problem with the whole of the mental health discussion is, I'll be frank, I fundamentally don't agree with the method through which mental health is analyzed and looked at. The Western paradigm is wrong. The Western paradigm is misguided, and we shouldn't use it as a point of reference, right?
No, absolutely. Abdurraheem, that what you've said right there, I think we should pause on that, because you're right. Many are using, and we've seen an increasing number of Muslims using the Western perspective of mental health. And in doing so, there's this whole repertoire of conditions that any one of them can tap into. And what we've seen is that it's become an excuse to renege, as you said earlier on, to renege upon responsibilities. And when you go down and traverse that particular road, you can continue looking for excuses until the cows come home, to neglect family responsibilities, neglect individual responsibilities, neglect a whole element of them. Again, I want to make it clear to the our audience that we're not talking about those genuine cases. And those genuine cases, increasingly living out here in the Middle East, mashallah, we've got some excellent doctors here, Abdurraheem, and when they are doing their diagnosis, and these are practicing Muslims, you can see that they're looking at prophetic guidance, as well as medical terms that and medical conditions that are agreed upon, universal, from their own research, not just taking lock stock everything that comes from the West, which unfortunately was something that we were familiar with previously. So when we're looking at, again, what I've termed using mental health as a crutch to renege on all sorts of responsibilities, the only way to counter that is to go back to what we started with, what you highlighted in the beginning, with regards to our spiritual focus, and and contentment, as you said, not happiness, but contentment, because contentment is a lot more comprehensive than happiness. We hear these things, in pursuit of happiness, and the things that you end up pursuing, when you get to that ideal, you realize you're not happy at all. You realize you've compromised and left aspects. People have left the deen. People have discarded elements of who they were, their own identity. And that brings us onto the next point, mental health. And it equates to an extent, and I'm putting this out there as a thought, to identity, knowing thyself, knowing oneself. And in getting to, if you say, well, I don't know myself, then we have to go back to the one who does know us, Al-Khaliq, okay? And what he says about our creation. This is very important that we look at this, that we go back to the one who created us and what he says about our creation. Because today everyone will say, well, I'm a bit of this, I'm a bit of that, making excuses here, why I don't do this, why I don't do that. You've got individuals who explain, well, I only pray this amount of times and that's because such and such. Yeah, okay, but you're Muslim, yes, then it's prescribed 5 times a day. You're Muslim, yes, then such certain things are prescribed. Allah's given us the best. He's provided and prescribed things for us that are the best. But today, everything we can eschew, everything we can marginalize because of our mental health. And as you said, it has, as some of our audience have said, we are making excuses to fulfill desires and weaknesses as well, Abdurraheem. The weaknesses have become the rationale for our mental health excuse.
Yeah, I think the thing, bro, it's very interesting that when we talk about, I was thinking about this, like mental health, right? So when we talk about health, right? So like generally most of us know, right, when I'm not well, and I'm talking about physical, right? There's something wrong with me. I have a pain here, or I have, something hurts, yeah. Or, I just feel tired the whole time and I didn't used to feel like that, right? So that's because we have a baseline of what we believe is normal, normality, right? What it means to be healthy. But here's a thought. What if everybody in a society was sick? What if everybody is born sick, right? Imagine, you probably don't even have to imagine it. I'm sure it exists, right? Imagine that there's people that all the water they drink is infected with some, I don't know, some parasites, and everybody, like without exception, yeah, in that society is sick, yeah. They wouldn't really understand what really being healthy is like, right? What if everybody is in a state of psychosis? What if everyone is literally mad and they don't know it? When I say everybody, I don't mean everybody, yeah. But I mean, what if a whole society is in a state of mental disorder and they don't know it? And those people who are themselves in a state of mental disorder are making diagnosis about people being in a mental disorder. It's like the blind leading the blind. It's
But what you're
the
saying
mad
is,
people are diagnosing who's mad and who's not mad. Do you see where I'm coming from, bro? The whole
but then
problem.
Abdurraheem, what you said is excellent in that that's the reality that exists now.
It is the reality. And that's what I'm saying. That's what I'm trying to say to everybody, right? That's exactly what's happening today, the beehive. That's what I believe the state of the world is. And it's more like that, right, than it has been ever before, because the more secularistic the world becomes, the more divorced they become from God and religion. At least Christianity had some, strong, profound connection with the tradition of being connected to a book that in whatever way, shape or form, is connected to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, right? But they don't have that. That doesn't even exist anymore. We're talking about a purely materialistic, secularist paradigm that is so far removed from it. Is madness from the Islamic perspective. It is madness. It is psychosis. And then they're the ones defining for us what's mental health. And that's why I say when someone says, oh, genuine, this and that, I'm just saying, according to who? Who decided? Who decides it's genuine? Even these good Muslim doctors, yeah, sorry to say, their whole paradigm is the Western paradigm. Their whole approach is the Western approach. Huh?
Not all. I've met a number over here actually.
But I almost guarantee it's very, very few. And even if I'd love to talk to them, because you'll still find that their point of reference, their point of discussion is going to be almost inevitably. And the thing is, bro, it's so insidious. We're affected by it in ways that we just don't even know. Like riba, like the Prophet said, the time will come when you won't escape the dust of it. And none of us, we can't. It's literally impossible. Like, unless maybe you are just a Bedouin, just with your sheep and this and that. How do you escape riba? You can't.
But this is in line. This is in line with what Iblis said in Surah Isra, where he said, "I will order them to slit the ears of cattle and basically disfigure aspects of their own creation. He leads us so astray, except who? Except those who are guided and adhering to the straight path, Sirat al-Mustaqim." This is what Allah said in response to Iblis on this occasion. And so when you look at what's taking place today, mental health as defined by the West or societally is on the increase, as you've mentioned. It's worse than ever before. I don't think it was even an issue. There had to be very severe cases, as we knew, 40s, 50s, 60s, in that way. Now, everyone and anyone can claim mental health.
But
To the
I
extent I
think it's genuine,
mentioned
bro.
gender
I
dysmorphia,
think I don't think
we've
we should.
gone down that, we've
Yeah,
gone into that rabbit hole so far, and there's not one element of spirituality or spiritual connectedness, the right spiritual connectedness, that will redress the imbalance, except the deen,
yeah,
obviously. But no one is speaking about that. No one is speaking to that. Even Muslims now, as I said, as crutches, are using this as a crutch to lean
yeah,
on with regards to again shunning particular aspects of responsibility, of their
yeah,
reality, of
yeah.
their existence, and it's
But
being accepted.
yeah, I think the thing is, bro, here is that look, it's not that I'm not empathetic. It's not that I do think that people really do genuinely have mental health problems, and it's not a crutch. It's just that, it's the reality. What I want to say is, it's okay. You do have like in the same, but unfortunately, what's happened is, look, a person used to say my iman is low. Now they say I have a mental health problem.
Right,
Actually, really, it's not. Most of the time it's not. It is a mental health problem, but it's an iman problem, right? It's to do with you not being connected to Allah. It's to do with you not realizing that life is a test, life is a struggle. Allah is going to test you with your mind, with your mental health, right? And it's fine, it's okay. Yeah, that's what life is about. Be patient. Allah will forgive you. Allah will raise your status. Allah will expiate your sins. Allah tests the people that He loves. What doesn't break your back is going to make you stronger. It's okay to have mental health problems. It's part of life. That's what you're going to have, right? But realize that ultimately it's connected to your iman, how you deal with it, how you respond with it. What cures do you take to get rid of it? That's what's really important. Are you going to start smoking dope, watching porn, watching TV, binging on Netflix, going out partying, discoing, whatever? Or are you going to read the Quran? Are you going to, give dawah? Are you going to, make dhikr? Are what are you going to purify your soul? Are you going to get to know yourself properly? Be honest with yourself. Like, so it's like, what path are you going to take? This is the real, this is the test, right? Life is a test. Yes, you will get sick. You will lose money in life, right? You things will happen to you and your family, and yeah, you will have mental health problems, because that's what life is about. But if people just, like, if they mean it from the point of view of, yeah, my mental health is suffering, it's like, yeah, but really in reality, in my opinion, bro, it's your iman is suffering. That's what we used to say. No one ever used to say, oh, my mental health. They would say my iman, because they
yeah,
made that connection. They
right,
understood the two things are combined. Verily, in the remembrance of Allah, the hearts find rest. In remembering Allah, hearts find rest. The mind finds rest in remembering Allah. The mind, the heart, the
right,
soul. You
right.
find
And
peace,
that's
rest,
right.
tranquility. It's an iman issue most of the time.
And Abdurraheem, to make that more applicable, let's look at some of the, back in the 90s. You and I know we'd be called, or would have people come to us, brothers or sisters, and we'd go and sit with them after we'd done some study circles in Leeds together or whatever. And they were really suffering. They had issues. There may have been some idiosyncratic behavior to them, but we saw that as behavior, and we weren't experts, but all we could do as Muslim men was advise them with what we knew of the deen. And I think that us coming from a background of once not being Muslims, and the aspects of hedonism that we were into very, very deeply, we know that that did not provide any solace or whatever. Comatose states for a while, yes, drugs and everything like that, and that was basically it. But that wasn't solace, and that wasn't removing any of the challenges that we actually had there. It was just putting them on pause for that particular moment. But when we advised these brothers and these sisters genuinely with what we knew of the deen,
Yeah.
and we could see, and even today, that they received that well, and we really spoke to them and said, look, you need to really dig deep in yourself and look into the deen, apply it to yourself. Really, do not look to the creation with regards to solving some aspects. Look first to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, turn to him, go and pray, cry to him, wail to him, not the impermissible wailing, but really turn to him in this regard. Now, I remember some of them coming back to us. Some needed more help. Obviously, some needed medical help. Medical conditions had been diagnosed. It would be a clinical depression as opposed to just saying I'm depressed, as you said, with regards to Iman. The Iman was low. There were other cases where I knew some individuals who came to the deen and they did have some issues, and literally we had to take them to the hospital because everything we did, we couldn't address in just on the point of advice. So there are, again, legitimate cases which we shouldn't shun and show intolerance to. We need to really give that more time to those individuals. Others, when you're giving them that advice and they're taking it, not because it's coming from us, they're taking it, they're really applying them, those things in their lives. Later on, when you see them, or if you happen to be in touch or they contact you and everything, more often than not, and I need to say this, not because it's coming from you and me, Abdurraheem, or a scholar or anyone else, it's because they applied it, and they all said, more often than not, do you know what? I really dug deep. I looked into myself. I really called upon Allah. I really took it to Allah. And you know what? It worked. Yeah, it worked.
Bro, listen, I've got to go because my mum needs me right now, because I'm staying in my mum's house and I'm looking after her. And talking about mental health, this is what I'm dealing with. You know, anyone who has an elderly parent who literally can't remember things from minute to minute will know what I'm dealing with. So that's just like what can you do? This is it's interesting because that's a proper physical condition. You know, someone, what can
say hi, mum, for me,
if they literally can't remember something from 1 minute to the minute. So yeah, I got to go and help her out and look after her.
No, so, I think this is again, I used the word apt in the beginning. I'll use the word apt now. Our shows deal with real life issues, Abdurraheem. This is a real life issue. Please say hi, hello, mum. She won't know who on earth I am. Okay. And this conversation, I think
you met my mum,
yeah. She might not remember me, I don't know, but say hi, mum. Give her a kiss on the forehead for me. And say he's your darker colored son. Okay, so that if she forgets. But no, you go and deal with that, Abdurraheem. And I think that we need to continue this conversation. There's a lot more. Everyone who's watching and listening, no, we're not experts, but we are Muslims who have some experience, personal experience, and do have some observations on this. And this is why we're sharing it with you, and you're sharing with us. So I'm going to say from him over there,
and from him over there, it's been a piece of cake. It's been a pleasure. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.